All right, so we're going to be going over the validate phone numbers challenge. This is just practicing our regular expressions. So yeah, let's kind of get to that. I want to clone it down. So just git clone, get that down to my machine, and then code that up. Sorry, that's not quite what I wanted. Code, algo, validate phone. All right, so that should bring up a new VS Code once my machine is ready for it. There we are. All right, so that might have you guys kind of help out here. So if you guys can be here. All right, so that's still not what I wanted. Apologies, having trouble opening my correct file. So cd into algo validate phone. All right, third time's a charm. Sorry for the delays. There we go. That's the one I want. Put that over here. Okay, so we need to validate, implement some functions using regular expressions. So if you read our README, the challenge is, all right, nothing too descriptive. Basically, we need to pass all the test cases in our spec file. So if we take a look at those in our spec file right here, looks like we have maybe eight test cases to pass. And it looks like we have some functions that we're calling. We're using the unit test framework. I think that's something that Raphael went over yesterday. But again, this is just a Python specific module that's used for testing. But okay, so our goal is to pass all these test cases. I bet if we ran this right now, we're not going to pass any of them because none of the logic has been implemented in our validate phone.py. So that is our challenge here. Let's just run our spec file just to make sure that it's running without errors. But we will not pass everything. So I'm going to do Python validate phone spec. All right, there we go. We ran 8, we failed 6. So I guess we accidentally passed 2. That I guess kind of random, but obviously that's still not valid as we need to add more. Okay, so let's get to implementing each of these functions. Andrew, you have a question?
Yeah, so you just ran the spec file normally, but yesterday we had to load the module with the -m.
-m. I'm not too familiar with
yeah, I was just wondering, I think it was Python module -m, and then we put like the folder name yesterday, but you were just able to run it running your Python this time.
I think Raphael might have had a different folder organization where maybe he had like multiple test cases in a folder. I actually don't remember. Raphael, do you remember?
Yeah, so Ronker is saying is right. I had my tests organized a little bit differently. So Anker has all of his tests in one file, so it's easy enough just to execute that one test file to run all your tests. I wanted to show you a different organization. It was maybe overkill for the demo I was doing that day, but I had broken my tests up into multiple files. So I was using the unit test built-in test runner to automatically run all of my different files. But if we only have one test file here, that's not really necessary.
Thanks. Yeah. So it's different use case here. All right. So I've actually commented out most of my test cases. I'm going to focus on the first 2 because the first 2 deal with this function called has phone number. So one is a positive case, as in we want to assert a valid number, and we also want to make sure we get a false for an invalid number. So let's go to our validate phone and try to implement this. So I'm just going to add some space here. We don't need our terminal right now. All right. So I'm going to phone a friend here and just go down my list of students here. Let's go with Sanjaya. Sanjaya, could you maybe help me with has phone number? Do you maybe know how you solved it, or just we get started together here? All right, Sanjaya, I'm not sure if Sanjaya is around. That's all right, we'll move on. Let's go with John Winko. Could you maybe help me with has phone number?
Get this one. For what we had done yesterday was we set up the regex before doing all that and use grouping. So I don't know if you want to go down that path.
Sure. If you want to guide me, I'll try to do, try to write down what you suggest.
All right. So before we even get into the has phone number, we set up a constant called phone regex.
Okay. Phone regex.
So the regex would be, we're gonna slash open parentheses question mark for capturing the area code if it exists. Then we have a capture group for the first 3 digits or first three numbers. So /D 3. Then that was and then we also want to capture the closing for the area code. So we'll do /close parentheses question mark.
Okay, yeah, so I think I understand where you're going here. Let's kind of just make sure we dissect this to make sure everyone kind of understands. So the first part here, can you tell me what the slash parentheses is doing for this case here? I'm actually going to add an R here. So we want to usually use raw strings because that makes typing easier for regular expressions. But can you tell me what this slash parentheses is doing and why we need to do that?
It's an escape character because the parentheses are used for grouping within Regex, so we have to escape it out as tracking for the character rather than for a function, basically.
Yep, yeah, escape characters. So this exists for regular strings, like when we do, some string, like we might want a new line character, we do \n. This is an escape character that says, hey, this isn't actually not an actual n, it's together, this is a new line character. That's how it's parsed. Same thing with regular expressions, like the parentheses has a meaning in regular expressions. If we don't want to use it for that particular meaning, we escape it saying, hey, we actually want to just use a parentheses and try to match parentheses versus the parentheses right here is actually being used for grouping. So this is a group that we created versus this is a literal parentheses that we're trying to match. I believe without using the R, we need to actually double escape because this is a normal escape for a string and then this is escape for regular expressions. I believe that's kind of a benefit of using R, which means we don't have to escape the normal string characters. All right, cool. So that is a parentheses we're looking for. What does the question mark do, John?
It matches 0 or 1. So if it's there, it'll match it. If it's not there, it'll match not having it.
Yep, absolutely correct. All right, cool. And then we are grouping. So anything in actual parentheses, that's going to be a group. And we'll talk about grouping. I'm sure we'll see it in our implementation here. What does \D3 do here? I'm going to ask maybe someone else just to get other involvement. Yelin, do you happen to know what \D and then curly braces 3 is going to kind of signify in a regular expression?
I think the \D reference all the digits.
Yep.
And the curly braces with the 3 in it, it's like how many times it will exist.
Yep, absolutely correct. So yep, I'm getting familiar with regular expressions. This is just notation to say we want exactly 3 digits in succession, right? It's not anywhere in our string. They got to be next to each other. So cool. All right, let's kind of comment all this stuff. But all right, John, if you want to kind of keep going with what your regular expression looked like.
All right, so after that, we could have a space, we could have a dash or nothing. So we'll set up for \S for spaces with a question mark.
Sorry, I'm saying some comments here. Okay, so you said, sorry, what do you want out of here?
\S, lowercase s.
Okay.
And a question mark to capture 0, 1 spaces.
Okay.
Then we'll do a character set. So open bracket, close bracket.
Is it square brackets?
Yes, square. And inside there, you'll have a dash or a period.
Okay.
Because there's some phone numbers that we're using periods as well. And after that will be a question mark because those are optional.
All right.
Then we do the next capture group for the next 3 digits. So we can just basically copy and paste the previous capture group.
Yep.
And then we'll do another bracket for capturing dash or dot. And then the last capture group to capture the last 4 digits.
Okay, cool. That sounds pretty reasonable to me. So again, this is our regular expression. Obviously, we need to test it out. Thank you, John, for providing that. But this, again, looks pretty complicated. So yeah, parsing regular expressions, like actually just looking at them, trying to figure out what they're doing, not always the easiest task. Obviously, the more you do it, the better you become at it. But there's a lot of stuff going on here. Andrew Tran, you have a question?
Yeah, could you explain again what the capture groups are for instead of just putting, since we're capturing the \D 3 times in the parentheses instead of just putting like the D 3 times?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is let's call this advanced phone regex or phone regex advanced, because this will work and this will be useful for other some of the other functions. But if you guys want like the simplest form, especially for has phone number, based on the inputs, again, I'm kind of assuming what the inputs are going to be. It's going to be something like this or something like this. Again, that's an assumption I'm making, but maybe a simpler phone expression might be raw string. You can do something as simple, potentially, sorry, \D, which means digits. You want 3, have a dash, another D. Sorry, that should be 3. So 3 digits, dash, 3 digits, dash, 4 digits. So again, I'm kind of assuming that we're going to get the dash formats based on the 2 test cases. Now, again, that's not maybe always the right assumption to take here, but you can have without grouping, without kind of having, optional parentheses or, periods. If you assume that your phone regex will be simple like that, you don't need to worry about grouping. Grouping is used for doing stuff like replacing, which we're going to do later on. But yeah, we could use either form here. John's regex is more advanced. It's going to capture more variations, which is probably better. But again, you keep it simple if that's kind of what you assume the input's going to be. Any other questions about either of these regexes? I'm trying to comment as we go along here, but might have missed something. Okay. If there's no questions about John's regex or even mine, we can move on to has phone number.
Oh, back to me. All right. So for the has phone number,
Sure.
Or actually, have you imported RE yet?
I have not. That is
Awesome.
important because we need to use the regex module. All right, so we import RE.
So for that, we'll just return a re.search. And we'll supply the the regex for the first parameter and the input string for the second, and whether or not not equals none.
So there's different ways you could compare to none. This is getting a little too particular. Most of the times you just do not equals none, but there's also an identity keyword called is, which will actually check if it literally is something. In this case, none is a specific type. So you could actually, this is slightly more correct. I'm not going to get too crazy about it, but yeah, not equals none works just as well. But yeah, okay. So we search our input string using the pattern. We search the input string, and then its search will return something. If that something is not none, that means we actually found what it was looking for. All right, cool. So nice one-line function here. Cool. Let's actually test it out. I'm going to bring up my terminal. Thank you, John, for assisting us with that. Let's do Python validate phone spec. All right, so we ran 2 tests and we got 2 dots, which means we passed them. So again, to review, we passed these 2 test cases. All right, so again, we want to make sure we accept digits, but not random letters here. All right, cool. Thanks, John. Let's go on to the second function. Let's get another person to help out here. Rob Works, could you help me out with get phone number?
Yep. So for the get phone number, I think we just use the same regex pattern. So you could use either the simple or the advanced.
Okay.
And I think I used re.find all just in case there were more phone numbers in the list than just one.
Okay.
And so re-find all inputs regex, and it looks through the input string, and then I just returned it to the variable that I assigned to. So for this instance, I assigned the variable to match and then just return match.
Okay, so we have a variable called match, and we're going to return match, you said?
Yep.
Okay. So we have phone number. Okay, let's give that a try. So we store a result and return match. So this is get phone number. Let's take a look at our test cases. So we have 2 test cases for get phone number. Let's uncomment those. Obviously, we brought more test cases than just 2. If we're writing additional test cases, but we're just going to go off of what we were handed. All right, so when you call a phone number with a good phone number, you should get the phone number. When you call it with a bad phone number, you should get none. So that's what we want. So let's see if that's what we get. Okay, so we ran the test cases and let's see what happens. So we failed 2 of them. That's okay. So that's where we kind of go back and see what we're getting here. So I'm just going to add a print statement here to make sure we see what we get here. And I'm going to actually just take my test cases and run them without the test suite, because the test suite output's not always what I want to see. So let's run get phone number with that and get phone number with the bad case. All right, so in this case, we should get the phone number spit back out to us. So we input this entire string. We should get this coming back to us. So let's get that. And then the second one should give us none. So I'm gonna run my main file. All right, so we get empty list here, and then we get a list here also of different pieces. I think this might be related to the regex you're using. Here we have groups. So let's actually try using this regex. Let's see if that makes a difference or not. So I'm going to delete the advanced regex that we created. Okay, so we still get a list back. So it looks like find all. Again, some of this comes down to reading documentation. So if you're not exactly sure what find all is doing, let's go to some documentation. So python.org has a really good detailed regular expressions documentation. So we can scan down here to kind of discover all that there is, but there's a find all. So it looks like find all returns non-overlapping matches, the pattern string, and a list of strings here, or tuples. However, looking at our test case right here, it doesn't look like we are expecting a list, right? So that's one thing we might need to account for if we're going to use find all. So in this case, since we're using find all, we could say, maybe do something like if match, so I want to make sure it's not none, then return match at 0. So I'm actually going to rename this, if you guys don't mind, to matches, because we might get multiple matches, but we just want the first one. So here, find all is going to return a list, because that's what find all does. We want to return the first match. So instead of returning a list, we return the first item. Otherwise, we want to return none. So that might help us out here. Let's take a look at this. What happened there? Oh, I forgot, I removed my print statement. Let me just print out these values. Any questions as we are attempting to solve this function? Okay, cool. So if I run this, yep, we get the phone number there, and we got none. So that's what we expected for these two entries. So yeah, what Rob had was correct. We just need to make sure we, instead of returning a list, our test cases wanted the actual items outside of a list. So find all will do that. I believe there's also a find method. So if we search our documentation, there's a search method. I think that's maybe something we could use. Scan through string, look for the first location where expression returns a match object. Return none if no positions. So search might be useful here if we're not expecting more than one. I'm not sure if there's a find. Yeah, there's not a find, but there's a search. So again, multiple ways to solve this with our regular expressions functions. I'm going to leave it this way because this totally works. All right, cool. Thanks, Rob, for that solution. Let's move on. So we have get all phone numbers. So this is going to be probably, find all is probably going to be useful to us here. So let's actually tackle get all phone numbers. For this, I'm going to ask, let's go with Lyman. Lyman, could you maybe help me with get all phone numbers here?
Sure. So the way we did it is we initialized an empty array called phone list under the function.
Sorry, you initialized an empty array?
Yeah, phone list.
Phone list. Okay, cool.
And then we did we created another variable called phone number, and we did the find all method from regular expression that we imported.
Just saw that one. So we have find all, and this takes in a phone regex and input string, I believe, just like we did before.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we did a conditional statement if phone number. And then for I or number or whatever variable you want to use and phone number, phone list dot append I, and then we return the phone list, and then else we just return the phone list. So it would return an array of the matches, and else it would just return an empty array.
Okay, so something like this.
Correct.
All right, so I renamed to phone nums. I don't know why it's blue squiggly. I think that's just a typo thing. And then we want to return phone list. All right, let's take a look at this solves our problem.
We still need to return the phone list. So we also have an else return phone list, because If not, because if it's not a phone number or if it doesn't find it, we still have to return an empty array. I think that might get into your next test case if you want to go ahead and.
Right. Yeah. So I think I understand what you're suggesting here, but I think this should solve it because if we have
Okay.
some phone numbers, it's going to get into this and append it. If it doesn't, we're still going to return
Okay,
the list, which is
perfect.
empty. Yep.
Got it.
I think that should satisfy both, but again, we're going to figure it out by running our test cases. So let's uncomment our next two, which deal with get all phone numbers. I'm going to run my spec file. I guess I didn't run my spec file for the last change that we made, but let's run them all. So Python, what is it? Validate phone spec. All right, ran 6 test cases. We got 6 dots. Great job, Lyman, and great job to everyone else helping out here. So, okay, cool. So we did that. A couple things I want to note here. The way Lyman suggested totally works, but I think you can kind of trim this down a little bit. As we saw with find all in our get phone number, that should actually return you a list. So matches should be a list already. So I don't think we need to necessarily kind of reappend into a list. So I'm actually going to get rid of this stuff. So now, again, find all should return a list to me. But the question is, if I don't get any matches, will that return an empty list or none? Let's actually find out. So let's just run this as is. I'm going to say phone nums is what I'm going to return. Call it list so we know it's a list. Always with the name of things so we can identify what they are. All right, phone nums list. Let's see if this works. Validate phone fit. All right, cool. So again, just keep in mind, find all is going to return a list to you automatically. Again, you might not know that. It's sometimes it goes back to green documentation. We're going to mention this over and over again. Green documentation is half the battle. Again, some of these methods return like a match object. So again, I'm not always sure if I'm going to get an array back or a match object or a span object. So again, always need to double check sometimes because I don't have this library memorized. I assume none of you guys have this module or library memorized either, but yeah, so it looks like it works with find all. So as we talked about, returns a list of strings or tuples. Empty matches are included in the results.
Yeah, I think that was the confusion because I think if you do just the match, it returns an object. And I think that's why we just assumed, I guess. But thanks for the heads up and showing that refactoring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I understand. Like again, different RE methods return different types. So not always sure what we're gonna get back. Sometimes we get something that looks like a list, but it's not actually a list. So we need to convert it to a list. But yeah, in this case, I think we get away with this. Okay, cool. Let's continue on here. We got hide phone numbers and format phone numbers. So a couple more here. Hide phone numbers. Let's uncomment this test case. Let's get another buddy to help us out here. Let's go with Brandon. Brandon D.
Yeah, sure. So you're on the hide phone numbers. Yeah, so our regex was a little bit different for this one.
Sure, that's fine.
So we did so \D and then bracket 3,
okay,
and then dash, and then \D bracket 3.
Yep.
Okay, then the next line, I set result equal to re.sub.
So result equal to re.subs. Yeah, so re.sub, if you don't know, reading documentation is how you get to know it, but sub will actually replace certain items in your string based on the pattern. So okay, sub, what do I pass in first?
So first would be the pattern,
okay,
and then the input, and then actually, then we did like a string of XXX-XXX. So that would basically pull out the whole match and replace it with that. And then the third argument is the input string.
Okay.
And then we returned result.
All right, cool. So let's give this a spin. So I think this will likely give us a passing test case. But then we might want to discuss a little bit more. So validate phone spec. All right, cool. We're 7 for 7 in terms of test cases. However, I'm going to say here that this isn't a fully correct implementation. And the reason is, what if I guess, again, it's kind of technicality / also knowing what the kind of the requirements are. In this case, we should only hide things that are phone numbers, right? So how do we know that we actually have a phone number? Like if I passed in, what is it? Hide phone numbers. Let's say I passed in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I would say this is not a phone number because our phone number should be 10 digits long, right? So I want, 999. This would be a valid phone number, but again, this comes down to interpretation because I don't think the directions were ultra clear. But I would argue if we pass in a string like 1, 2, 3, sorry, this, so 3 digits dash 3 digits, which is what the regex will be matching. I argue that this is not a phone number. Therefore, my function should not hide anything because it's not getting a phone number, would be what I'd interpret. So this is along the right track. Using sub is correct, but this is where we get into using groups. So that's something we kind of talked about earlier, where we had kind of like a crazier regex here that's kind of creating some groups. I'm going to stick with Brandon's regex. We're going to add on to it. So here we want to match a phone number. And as we talked about, if we kind of assume that phone numbers will look like exactly like this, again, I'm assuming this based on this input. We can use John Winko's regex if we get different formats, but in this case, just keep it simple. I'm going to assume all of them are going to come in as dashes or the dash format. So here we create a phone number. Now the question is, well, how do we actually replace this phone number? So if I run this, let's print out, or let me just print out down here. Let's print out the return value of this should be XXX, XXX, and then 4, 5, 6, 7. This one, in my kind of requirements, I would say should not change anything. So if I run both of these, I should get X's in this one, but this one should be unmodified. These should be strings, not numbers. Not bad. All right, let's give this a spin. So I'm going to clear my console, do Python validate phone.py. Okay, so notice we get XXX, but we don't get the last 4 digits, right? The requirements, or at least the test cases, said we need to return the last 4 from there, right? So that's something we need to figure out. But this second line, notice we got back exactly what we spit into it. That's what we wanted. Again, requirements are kind of fuzzy there. But here, we need to both match this, but still preserve the last 4 digits. So the way we do that is with using a group. So we group whatever we are interested in. In this case, I'm only interested in the last 4 digits. So that's why I add these parentheses around the last 4 digits. All right, and this is where, again, just a little more regex, I guess, magic here. We can use a backslash and then the number of the group here. So this is our only group here. So this \1 is a reference saying, hey, whatever group you found, like whatever matched your group here, just reinsert that right here. So it's kind of like a placeholder almost saying, hey, whatever group existed before, replace it with exactly that. So it's going to be dynamic. Each phone number is going to be a different value here, but it's referring to the same kind of section within your match. Andrew Tran, question.
The dash one works even though you do the group in the line above it.
Yes. So because the sub function is going to match a pattern, but part of what's going on here, it's going to match and find all the groups also. So if you actually want to see this, if you guys don't mind a quick detour, let's go with match object equals re.search and just pass it the pattern and the input string. All right, so let's actually investigate what we're getting back here. So right now I'm just going to delete my group and let's print match. Let's see if this works for me. I'm not going to care about my output right now. Well, let's run this and see what happens. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so notice what we get in that match object. It's not the easiest kind of understand what this has, but it's a match object. It has something called span within it. So I'm assuming these are the indices that match from my original string. So index 0 is probably right here. This is probably index 12. I didn't count them out, but I'm just going to kind of go with that. And this is telling me exactly what it matched within that string. All right, so what if I added a group? Let's see if that changes my output. I'm actually not sure what I'm going to see here. So if I add a group and rerun this, let's see what the match object contains now. So that's still the same. I think what I want to do is there's a group function. Now, some of this I'm kind of pulling out because I know from experience, but let's actually look up match object and see what that is all about. Match objects. Python regex. So each group you create, there should be a way to access it. Let's go to W3 schools. All right, so there's a span object, which we kind of see is in there, but we want to use groups. So there's a group function. This is not going to give me what I want. I'm just going to kind of show you how to access the group. So here, if I do print dot group and then the group number, group 0 is going to be your full match. For every additional group that you have, you can add, you can access that via the group function. So if I do group 1, this should get me the first group. So it's only giving me these 4 digits. Again, I know this seems like I'm just pulling this out of thin air, but part of it's reading documentation. We could try to find that, but I run this. Notice what I get out. I get the full phone number from the first print statement. The second one only gives me the 4 digits because I've decided to group those together. So group 1 refers to only the 4 digits that were matched within the entire match. You can add as many groups as you want. You could add nested groups. So let's say I want to group the, excuse me, the last 7 digits. Well, now what I've highlighted here is group number 1. The nested one is actually going to be group number 2. So if I wanted to, if I cared both about the 7 digits and the 4 digits, I could do additional groups. So there's no limit to how many groups you can have. You could have groups within groups. You can have, as many groups as you find necessary. So in this case, again, group 1 is going to refer to the 7 digits. This one should be last 4 digits, the last 7 digits, and this is going to be entire match. All right, so we run this, maybe keep those print statements in there. All right, so notice we get the full match, and then we get 7 digits and then 4 digits. So that's how grouping is really powerful, because it allows you kind of to dissect or kind of get a sub part of that match, if anything matched. Again, this is all relying on the fact that something matched this entire thing, and therefore we get groups out of it. If we only matched partially, these groups wouldn't exist because our regex search would fail then, because we're looking for the entire pattern first and then trying to kind of pick out groups from there. I saw a hand raised, but I kind of missed the name there. Who? Jesse, go for it.
Quick question on the dot groups group. The 0, is that going to return all of the groups, or do we need to use dot groups to do all that?
So 0 will return you the entire match. There might be a groups function. Let's actually print out groups. Let's see if that gives us maybe a list of stuff. Yeah, so it looks like groups gives you not the entire match, but a tuple looks like of every single group that was matched. So this is the first group, that's the second one. Yep, so that's another way we could access groups. Cool, good to know about that. Thanks, Jesse. There was another hand, but I'm not sure if the question went away, but please ask if you have any questions. All right, so now that we understand kind of how grouping works, let's go back to our problem at hand here and what's going on here. So here, again, \1 is referring to, I want to make this a raw string probably. \1 is referring to this group if there was a match. So let's run this and see what happens. So, oops, I left in my first group. That's accidental. I want the last 4 digits, not the last 7. So if I run this again, notice we get exactly the number we want because it says, all right, we found a match. This entire thing matched. Great. That's first thing. Second thing is, all right, well, give me the group within it and use that for the replacement. So we replace this entire thing with XXX, XXX, and whatever was in the last 4 digits, because that's what we wanted to do. So again, if I change my numbers here, if I make this, 8888, I should get 8888. Yep, there we go. And then we still are not modifying a non-phone number. So that looks like this pattern works. All right, cool. So let's run our test spec, make sure we have not broken anything with that latest change. And then we got one more function to go. All right, cool, 7 dots. Let's power through this. All right, this one's the hardest one. So I'm sure some of you guys struggle with it, but again, this is kind of how regular expressions work. You're gonna kind of get the correct regex to match exactly what you want to. So this is format phone number. Basically, you're going to get an input string with various formats because this is, typical formats you might see, people enter in, whether it be a full phone number with no delimiters. You might get dots as delimiters between sections, dashes, maybe spaces, and like the parentheses for area code. So all these might be valid phone numbers that like a user might enter into a form, for example. Let's say we want to like standardize it to use the dash format. That is what we're going for with this format phone number. So let's get this attempted. Let's go with John Price. John Price, could you help me out here?
Yeah, 1 second. Okay, yeah, so we used the like dot replace method in the format phone number.
Okay, could I ask what pattern you used? Because we need to start with that.
So we actually were struggling with this one. So we
Okay.
used we made a new string and then like did input string dot replace, then did it 4 times.
Okay.
For like the first case being like the thing we're trying to remove, like either the open or close parenthesis, the period or a space, and then replacing with an empty string.
Gotcha. So this will work, but I will kind of short circuit this and say, while this will work, this kind of gets around the need for using regular expressions. So again, the replace is kind of doing it, but you're doing it kind of hard coding it all. Like look for parentheses, look for periods, which is kind of what we do with our regular expressions, but regular expressions will kind of do it all in one pass instead of calling replace 4 different times. But I'm glad you guys came up with the solution. Again, half the battle is solving the problem and then figuring out maybe how to improve it. So I'm going to maybe go back to regular expressions, and we're going to actually use something similar to what John Winko described here. So I'm just going to use his regex. Let's copy it and place it down here. So yeah, this should take care of a lot of it. But again, we want to make sure we know what we're actually capturing here. So again, this is saying optional parentheses, which should match. Let's get our test cases here. So I'm going to copy all these. And let's talk about how this regular expression kind of matches all of these cases all in one go. Why do I keep adding these? All right, so we have 4 different possible formats. Again, we could have more variations here, but this regular expression that we wrote above, so parentheses, these parentheses may or may not exist. So backslash parentheses question mark says, if you find a parentheses, great, that's valid for matching a phone number. If you don't find one, that's also fine. Like either way, we're going to be fine. But within those parentheses, we must have 3 digits. So this is saying, you know, we have parentheses, cool, we found 1 or 0 or 1, that's what question mark means. And then we found 3 digits. So this is still going to be thumbs up, as in this is at like this far into our regex, we're still valid for a phone number. Now if we have parentheses and have like, you know, a letter here, this would be, nope, this is not matching our pattern, therefore this is not a phone number. Because we say we still need exactly 3 digits in between those parentheses if those parentheses exist. So we've gone this far in our regex for this part right here. Then we have a backslash s question mark. This backslash s is a meta character for white space. So this is saying, hey, if you have a space here, cool, that's fine with us. If we had 2 spaces, according to John's regex, this would not be fine. All right, so it all comes down to what variations you might have. So you might deem this invalid for phone number input. But if you do want it, you can maybe do, you know, 1 or more, which I think we want to do any. So asterisk would mean 0 or any number. If you want to do any number of spaces, so let's say, you know, user entered this in, that could match. Well, let's keep it what we had before. So question mark means at most 1, but 0 is acceptable also. And then this means, you know, we might have a dash here, we might have a period here, or we might have nothing here, actually. So the way I did it, I'm going to change John's regular expressions just a little bit. I'm going to add that space in here. So basically, one of these 3 should exist, but not all 3. So I think John's regex was a little different than mine. Just kind of highlight it. The way John had it written, you could have a space and then also a dot, because you're saying a space could exist, but then also a dot or a dash. I feel like this format's not very common, neither this format either. So again, I would say maybe put the space in here so that either you have a space, dash, or dot separating your numbers. So that's a slight change I would make. Then we continue on. I'm going to add another space here because maybe, you know, maybe this is a format they want. Again, I'm making some assumptions here. You guys probably made some other assumptions. That's totally fine. But essentially, we have something between the numbers, potentially. That's what question mark means, because this number has nothing between any of the digits. So question mark is optional, versus plus would mean it has to be there 1 or more times. All right, so we have 3 digits. Again, this is another group we created. So notice we're creating some groups. This is our first group. This is our second group. And our third group is at the very end, and that could be separated by, again, dash, dot, or white white space. All right, any questions on this regex? Marcos, you had a question. Marcos? Not sure if we could hear you or not. We'll come back to you. Andrew Tran, question?
Not a question about this regex specifically, but just about the use of regex.
Mhm.
So this regex seems like I understand it now that you explain it and go through it, but it seems like in like diagnosing it, it's almost like hard to just understand what's going on.
Yes.
And like the method John Price talked about earlier with like moving the things out would seem to be like a safer thing to do in like a real project. than
Yeah, so
this.
yeah, John's solution was totally valid. If I understood correctly, he's just kind of replacing one by one. Like he finds parentheses, he just chops those out. If he finds dashes or periods, he kind of chops those out or does something with them. However, I'm actually curious about John's solution because we need to actually, I guess, never mind, sorry. John's solution would work, but let's kind of extrapolate it. So this goes back to kind of writing efficient, sorry, not efficient code, but condensed code. So what if instead of just having dashes and periods, I also allowed having asterisks in the middle and also percent signs and maybe, you know, the X to kind of separate them out. Again, I know I'm kind of making stuff up here, but if our problem grew, like our requirements grew, like, hey, Andrew, we have users entering in, you know, that caret symbol to separate numbers. We need to update your code. Well, for your code, you're going to need to add a new replace method. So let's say we had 12 different things we want to replace. Well, that's 12 lines of code for each one of those, you know, characters we want, which doesn't sound too bad, but again, that doesn't mean our code is as flexible versus here. I still need to make updates, but here I would just need to add, you know, a caret symbol. Actually, a caret's kind of bad here, so let's go with asterisks. So now if I have asterisks as another possible character, yes, I still need to make maybe a couple modifications here, but it's all in one place, and the regex kind of does the whole entire matching and replacing for me versus doing it one by one. Now, again, both are valid solutions. The regular expression just makes it easier, quote unquote, easier in that once you have that regex created, yes, creating that regex is half the battle. It kind of is all in one instead of, you know, 12 or how many different use cases you might have. But yeah, thank you for that question. Marcos, I know we had a question maybe, or you have your audio back.
Yeah, I think I got it fixed.
Cool.
So my question is, in the brackets or whatever, just the normal square brackets, that dot, is that saying any character, or are you actually looking for a dot? And if you are looking for a dot, why wouldn't you, like, do you have to escape it?
Great question. Inside square brackets, everything's treated as a literal, or almost everything is treated as a literal. The caret character actually is a negation, so it means not. So if I do it like not y, this is gonna look for anything that's not y, I believe. I might need to double check that. Let's go to a regex cheat sheet because this is what I use. So regex cheat sheets, Python is probably what I want. Obviously, I've Googled this before. Let's go to debugx. I've used this before. Again, there's a lot of meta characters. I do not memorize them, but let's see. So let's look for square brackets right here. So square brackets, these are treated as literals. You can use a dash. So a dash is a special character. That means a range. So here they're doing A, B dash D. This means A, B, C, or D, because this is a range from B to C, B to D. The caret means not. So this means one character except A, B, C, and D. So there are some special characters, but not the full gambit. So again, dot or star, those are just treated as literally dot and star in there. Good question though. Yeah, regular expressions definitely it gets kind of tricky based on your use case there. Okay, so let's kind of continue on with this. I want to wrap up this challenge. So we get this regular expression, which I think might work. We need to replace it with, and our format's going to be, we want group 1 dash group 2 dash group 3. So since we incorporated groups in here, again, round parentheses means we're creating capture groups. So that means group 1 is going to be my first 3 digits. Group 2 is going to be my second 3 digits, and then my last group 3 is going to be my last 4 digits. So again, we, as mentioned, create as many groups as we want to, or as we need to. So here I'm going to use the sub method again. So with results equals re.sub. The inputs need to be our pattern. So we're going to use phone regex advance. Let me rename this so I don't collide with it. New. We want to replace with is the second parameter. And then the third parameter is our input string. Let's see if that gives us what we want. I could have mistakenly forget about a certain case, but let's try this. So results, okay, let's get rid of this. And let's give our test case a spin. Python, validate phone spec. All right, we did not do it because why? So we should have gone dashes. What did I screw up here? We have groups. Looks like it doesn't like these. All right, let's debug a little bit. I'm going to use print statements, results, and let's go with this. And we will finish this up shortly. So we want to format this. Oops. All right, trying to copy and paste, not working well. All right, that's our input. Let's grab that over here. Let's see what's actually going to print out. And I'm not sure what I'm missing here. So Python validate phone.py. Okay, so result is not actually, so it looks like my regex is not matching, is what I'm getting here, because it's just spitting out what I put into it. Ivan, you have a question or helpful hint here?
Yeah, I think I dealt with this issue earlier. Isn't it like if it matches a certain character in the group, it'll only find that group? So like if your first group is saying dashes, unlimited amount of dashes, and your first group has one dash, it'll match only one dash. And if you have the same rule for the next one, and the second one has two dashes, it won't match. That's what I discovered yesterday. So I don't know if that's your problem. Like it's matching the first one, which has like a space or whatever, and it's saying that, all right, that's the first group, only that group, no matter the rule, will be matched.
Yeah, sorry, I think I spotted my error. So I didn't quite catch what you were suggesting, but I think my error here is question mark. I was saying parentheses must be part of my output. It looks like I forgot my question mark. So again, regex is very finicky. If you forget one character, they get throw it off. Thank you, Ivan, though, for keeping some eyes out here on my regex. But let's try giving this a run. I think that should fix it. There we go. Okay, yeah. So question mark again. This I was saying before without the question mark. I was saying you must have a parentheses in your input to match it correctly, but I actually want that optional. So I think we're getting what we want here. So let's go back to our spec file, quickly run that, and wrap up this challenge. Yeah, there we go. So we ran 8 test cases, got 8 dots, and I think we're good here. Again, thank you, Ivan. Sorry to kind of cut you off there, but yeah, I think I spotted my error there. Okay, cool. So get rid of this print statement, and I think we're done. So that's some fun with regular expressions. Again, yes, you're not going to be using them a lot. So if you're like, after today, you're like, I'm still not comfortable using them, that's okay. Just understand the purpose of regular expressions, understand why you might need to use them for whatever you're doing in the future. You might be like, hey, I need to match something within the string. I could do that through like a replace method, or I could use regular expressions because it might be easier. But it takes practice to kind of get better with regular expressions. I am not a regular expressions master. I use my cheat sheet. I would encourage all you guys to use your cheat sheet to make sure you know what you're trying to do here. Okay, so that wraps up our challenge. I'm going to stop the recording.